the Expert is brought to you by Auger Hollingsworth Accident and Injury Lawyers.
Well, it's time to Ask the Expert with Auger Hollingsworth. This morning, we are discussing home pool responsibilities and claims that can arise for homeowners. Brenda Hollingsworth is here to take your questions on personal injury law. A reminder to all that Ask the Expert is for information purposes only. If you have a question for Brenda, you can send it to us at ottawa.morning@ctv.ca, or you can call in live 613-789-6559, extension 2803, ottawa.morning@ctv.ca. So if you have a question for Brenda, you can send it to us at ottawa.morning@ctv.ca, and we can continue on with that in the conversation. Or, of course, you can continue to call in live, and we'll keep this conversation going. You know, it's always so great to have you on because there's so much uncertainty and questions out there, and we're going to talk with homeowner responsibilities related to pools because that is a hot topic this year.
It is, and every year there's things that happen around pools. Sometimes they make the news, sometimes they don't, but it's a big responsibility if you are someone who owns a pool.
Yeah, so let's say that you do have, you know, you've gotten everything certified, you've got the pool set in there, you're a new homeowner with the pool. What are some things that you should be mindful of before you have friends over, or just in general being that homeowner?
Right. Well, so, I mean, there are city regulations that you've probably complied with. You probably have a fence. You probably keep it locked. But you will be surprised at how often people leave gates open. If you have people who come and service your backyard, you have a lawn service, you have somebody to pick up your dog poop, making sure that they lock that gate on the way out, that's your responsibility, right? So there's all that kind of thing. But where we see a lot of issues is the exit from the house to the backyard, right? So the gate outside, most people have that covered. But your door from inside your house to your backyard, we had a very serious case a few years ago where it was a near drowning, fortunately, but somebody assumed a toddler couldn't open a door that they absolutely could open. So that is where you have to start to really be critical of your surroundings to make sure everybody's safe.
Yeah, and it's really good to be, you always want to be over-prepared and prepared for the worst, especially if it's your own home, right? You have friends coming over that has kids or children, or maybe just somebody that doesn't have the ability to swim. It's always important to, be on and make sure that you've got everything in safe protocol set up. Are there some other examples you have for us that you've been dealing with claims?
Well, we've had cases where, fortunately, we've had mostly, in pool situations, has been mishaps that haven't been full drownings, but diving situations, we've all heard of cases where somebody has dove into shallow water and bad things have happened. That happens all the time, right? And you see the kids, maybe they're doing shallow dives and they do shallow dive after shallow dive, and of course it's safe. They're just doing a shallow dive until they don't do a shallow dive, right? Until it's a deep dive into the shallow end or into just at the drop off, and you end up with a spinal cord injury or a brain injury. Those happen every single year in Ontario. Every year there are people who dive into pools and end up with spinal cord injury. So it's just something you've got to enforce those rules.
Yeah, I think it's really important too, because you want everyone to feel safe and while also having a really good time, but implementing from the get-go, hey, the deep end is not very deep. It's forced. No diving, no jumping. Just make sure that you guys are being safe around the pool, but not even just inside the pool. But you're getting in, you're out. It starts to get a little bit slippery in and around. Would you also be liable in that scenario too if someone slips?
Absolutely. So you need to make sure that your surface is non-slip. Now, around a pool, it's hard to be perfect, right? So one of the things you have to do is make sure people aren't running. But if you have a slippery tile and somebody slips and hurts themselves, I'm going to be sending an engineer to your house to test that tile to make sure it is a non-slip, appropriate tile for that environment. And if it's not, that's going to be part of the claim. So, you want to be picky with your contractors. That stamped concrete looks beautiful. Make sure it's textured. All of those things really matter.
Yeah, and each situation is a little bit different. And I know just from experience from my families and friends of what I've heard, everyone has a little bit of a different situation, or they're just so unaware that this is their responsibility. So
Ask the Expert is brought to you by Auger Hollingsworth Accident and Injury Lawyers.
And here's their information that you can contact Brenda and her team, ahinjurylaw.com or 613-233 4529. You can ask any questions that you have. Brenda and the team will get back to you with some answers. Today we are focusing on some responsibilities of the homeowner. And we have Auger Hollingsworth here today with us, Brenda joining us. And we talked about pools and responsibilities, but I think it's really important, especially this time, that we turn to some of the responsibility regarding our beaches this year.
Right.
Because there have been a lot of instances and a rising problem with that. So I think it's important that we kind of veer the conversation from pools, which we got, and still continue to ask your questions in and head towards beaches.
Right. So this is obviously government responsibility, different levels of government depending on who's running the beach. We have sort of questions about, is a lifeguard responsible if something terrible happens at a beach? And that's a question that we get as stories are in the news. And lifeguards don't guarantee safety, right? It's not like, oh, there was a drowning at a beach with a lifeguard, therefore the lifeguards are liable or the employers of the lifeguard are liable. That's not how it works. Lifeguards are responsible to be reasonable lifeguards. So they have to fulfill their duties in accordance to how they've been taught. So scanning and doing all the things that lifeguards learn to do. If they do that, and they can prove that they did that and something terrible happens, there may not be liability, right? There certainly won't be liability on the individual lifeguards. And then you step back and you say, okay, so those lifeguards did what they could. Were there enough lifeguards? Did those lifeguards have the breaks that they needed? Were they out in the sun all day with nowhere that they could go for shade so that their ability to focus was removed? So you'd start with the individual, and then you'd back out and say, are there systemic problems that contributed to this problem? And the number of lifeguards would be probably the main thing that you would look at. And there are regulations in Ontario that say what the proper ratio is. But there's also standards, like the National Lifeguard Service has standards, and those two things might not match, right? Lifeguarding standards probably require more lifeguards than regulations. And so, did the city follow the best practice or just the regulation? And that's the kind of thing we look at.
Yeah, and let me ask you too, and I think it's perfect timing because we've just heard this week that city was really hoping to have lifeguards on duty beyond Labor Day weekend, as so many families are out on the beaches. There's a shortage of lifeguards, so that's no longer going to be the case heading into the long weekend. So ahead of Labor Day and during that weekend, what would be your message to families and anyone that's going to be out there, and how best to prepare and be safe?
Yeah, so you've got to make sure you have enough adults for the number of children that you're taking. You want to make sure that children who need flotation devices have them. Just put those life jackets on the minute you get on the beach, and if they're building a sandcastle, have them wear the life jacket, right? Who cares? They don't care. Just make sure that the ratio is close, because we have a case right now where the issue is supervision of children at a beach. Friendly adult brought too many kids to the beach, other people's kids, and something terrible happened. And, that individual is being sued.
Yeah, and obviously everything that we're trying to do here is to prevent the most catastrophic event taking place. And unfortunately, it's been something that we've seen on the incline throughout the season so far. So we really appreciate your time this morning, Brenda, because you're giving some guidance on how best to prepare, both from a legal standpoint, but then also from a safety standpoint. So again, we really appreciate your time this morning.
Thanks for having me.
And as always, you can always tweet your questions, you can call, you can email ottawa.morning@ctv.ca. Of course, info@ahinjurylaw.com for Ask the Expert. For Auger Hollingsworth, always so lovely to have Brenda in to talk about all these important questions,